so much to Trevor for being here and for this absolutely, I have to say, spectacular book, which I have devoured, and you can tell I've read it because I folded down loads of corners. It's a sort of, it ambushes you in how much somebody who, like me, is a pop music fan and fan only, to really get inside the process of the making of these absolutely spectacular tunes. So forgive my first question, because it is an idiot question, but you answer it in the book, which is, tell us what a producer actually does, because I think lots of people don't really get it. You imagine a sort of dude doing this, but that's not it.
No, you sort of hire the guy that does that.
Yes.
You know? Yeah. I used to do that years and years ago, but it got way too complicated. And like drum machines, you know, I used to be able to program the drums, but not anymore. It's way too complicated. So what does a record producer do? You're the person responsible for finishing the record and getting it right, making sure the key's right, making sure the artist likes the way you've done, you know, the record. It's pretty absorbing, you know, and the thing is, it's one of those loose terms that there's so many different ways of doing it within the sort of word producer. Some, you know, Jimmy Iovine was famous for doing most of his production from the telephone outside the you know, control room, and occasionally shouting, you know, no jazz, you know, things like that. You know, everyone does it in a different way.
It's a good rule, generally, I think.
So
I've picked a few lines from the book. It's laugh out loud funny. It made me laugh a lot, actually.
I was trying to be funny at times.
It worked. And I've picked a few lines that are just a sort of springboard to help us in. And this I just thought was classic, where you said, "I know for certain that the first thing to happen when I try to make a song better is that I'll make it worse," which seems like an odd thing, but why?
Well, you know, it takes, you know, sometimes it could take 15 minutes to write a song and a week to rewrite it, because it's nearly right, and you're searching for the last little piece of the puzzle, and so you maybe, I think I say it in the book, you change like 4 or 5 things, and suddenly it's awful, you hate it, you know? Well, did anything work from those 5 things that we did? And maybe one thing worked and you keep that. It's very hard to make music better, because I guess when I say better, I'm meaning more commercial, or more that people would get it quicker, you know?
And quite often, the stories you tell about the songs that you were working on in the book, and songs that people here would sing along, you know, all the way through, verse, chorus, middle bit. You know, they would know all of it, all the bits. The song that we know hardly exists at all at it's not like, you know, here comes a pop star, they've written the song and they give it to you and you sort of just polish it up a bit. I mean, the song is barely there in many cases.
Well, it's something like Relax was just an idea, you know, it was just a boom, boom. You know, when I heard the demo, it was like a blues scale. Dang, 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 gang, gang, gang. Relax, don't do it. That's what it was. You're right, they do start out quite primitive, but I could tell just straight away that there was something really cool about the idea of it, you know, just the sort of way it went. I don't know, looking back on it, I don't know what the hell it was, but I really saw something. And it wasn't until I actually started trying to make the record of it that I realized, of course, God, it doesn't have a sort of verse, chorus, hook or anything like that. It was more like a jingle, you know?
It's a good jingle.
Yeah, it was a good jingle.
It's a good jingle. And I love the story, although I sense that you've got some regret about it, that there's obviously Holly Johnson in Frankie Goes Hollywood, and then there's the sort of, what were they called, the boys or the lads, or the other musicians, and then they're not on that tune.
Well, they're singing on it and they're jumping into a swimming pool.
The splash is them.
The splash is them, yeah.
They're excellent at that.
Yeah, I know. I felt bad that I could have put them on at the end, but you know what? I was knackered. I've been working on it and I was worn out, and I had no more patience, you know?
I think the people who work in our podcast team really feel you with that. I think so. So we are going to talk about the Buggles. There's a line in the book that I'm really interested to unpack a little bit, because you say, whatever magic I had as a producer, and I think there is magic, I really do, I could only make a little bit of it work on myself. But that isn't true with Video Killed the Radio Star.
Yeah, but you know, to be honest, I mean, a Video Killed the Radio Star, the vocal is only like 4 notes, and in time I only sing the verse, you know. The heavy lifting is done by the girls on the chorus, really. Do you know, it's funny, I went through this about 4 months ago. I was listening to a vocal I'd done on the demo, and I thought, Jesus, this is awful. No wonder, you know, this world, because it's me, it's not very good. And then I thought, no, I should think like a producer. How do I get me better? Well, I thought, I'm in the wrong key. I'm a major third wrong, you know? So you think differently, you know?
We're going to have a listen to a bit of Video Kill the Radio, just as a treat for everyone. I know that's what you're here for. Louder, louder! Great tune. Yes, Matt. It's a good job you're not the choir. I just wanted to talk, you obviously deconstruct how it all came about and what was happening in your life when that was being made, that song, and then the sort of exhausting all around Europe promoting it everywhere, so in the whole thing. There's a bit that you describe about how you can hear on the track the sound of you kicking an amp.
It's not actually on the amp, it's if you solo up the vocal track.
If you do what?
If you solo up the vocal track on the multi-track, you can hear it in between, I heard you on the wireless back in 52. The thing was, it was an old AC-30. It was the one I sang the demo through. You see, we did a great demo of Video Killed the Radio Star, and then we had to do it again for contractual reasons, and so I had to get exactly the same amp. And I'd sold it by that point. I was a bit broke, and the guy that bought it off me was a guy called Ivor, I remember, and I had to pay a lot of money to get it back because he knew I just had an advance from the record label.
Brilliant tunes and great stories. Now, the sort of unsung hero, probably in, I don't know if the unsung hero in popular music, but certainly a character in the book is the studios. I was very noticed where you were doing this work, and you talk about how much you loved them. And if you were to ask most people in this room, yourself excluded, Trevor, to name a recording studio, they would say Abbey Road.
Yeah.
But I never especially liked Abbey Road, which is like a bank, with the Beatles studio #2 being the worst. Now,
I've taken that out of the paper bag because I thought I might have a problem getting back into Abbey Road. Because
so what's so bad about Abbey Road?
Well, the monitoring isn't great in Studio 2. That's why the Beatles got it kind of 24-hour
Studio 2's the big one, which we can imagine on that piano in the corner.
The band are right down there, and the control room's up here.
Right.
And there's just something about the design of the control room that makes it tough for me. People have made great records in there. Every studio is a compromise. In my life, I must have had so many of them now. Most of them have gone. I still got a couple. They're always a compromise. But back in, the 70s and 80s, they were beautiful, you know. In London, you had Mayfair Studios. It wasn't just Abbey Road, this is age. I can't remember a single one. Psalm, the one just around the corner from here. And so there were loads of studios, Good Earth Studios, and they were all beautiful, air-conditioned, wonderful playback systems. But back then, people were prepared to pay like $1,000 a day for a studio.
Right.
£1,000, and it's very few people that could afford to pay £1,000 a day for a studio now. They don't need it. The minute that it, that you used to have for broadcast quality audio, you had to have, in the 70s and at the beginning of the 80s, you have to have this huge 2-inch machine that required a maintenance department because it had to be lined up every time you used it, with screwdrivers and test tapes and stuff. Yeah. And that was broadcast quality audio, and suddenly, you can do it on a domestic computer, and you can do it on your iPhone, it's crazy.
So you don't need a recording studio now?
Well...
Or do you?
Well, I do, because I want to go into a nice space where I know what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
You see, It's like some big Hollywood director that I met because I was doing a couple of things for him said, "What do you think of my sound system? It costs $100,000. And it was this fantastic deck and this amazing speakers, Chinese valve amps and everything." I listened to it and I said, 100 grand? You should have spent 50 grand on the room and 50 grand on the playback system because the room sucks, you know? It's like square with concrete walls. It doesn't matter what you play back in that, it won't sound any good. Whereas, you know, recording studios generally very carefully designed so the music sounds good.
Interesting, interesting. I want to play a track which is, and I'm not making this up, one of my Desert Island discs. So when Lauren's ready for the call, I'm here. Which I think if I remember right in the book, is I think you recorded Left to My Own Devices in Abbey Road, was it? Because of the orchestra.
We did the strings in there.
Yeah, because that's what it's good for.
Yeah.
I love the bit where Chris Lowe's losing his nut in the control room because I hate it. You're like, calm down, Chris. Let's have a listen to Left to My Own Devices, just a treat. What a tune. To the Pet Shop Boys Greatest Hits tour thing that they did at the O2 not long ago, this year it was in fact, and I mean it was banger after banger after banger. They're an extraordinary band. When you write about them, and when you just said downstairs, lots of people are still alive, so you have to be nice about them to an extent. But you really, there's a reverence with which you talk about the Pet Shop Boys, quite particular, I think. Do you really love them?
Well, they weren't like the average artist or the average muso to work with. They were just such good fun. You'd look forward to sort of seeing them every day, you know? Because working with them meant you got to sit in a small room with them.
Yeah.
And Neil would always be reading the book review, New York book review or the London book review.
Yeah.
And so it was great. There was always a great atmosphere, and they really understand what producers do, so they would be encouraging, you know?
They do seem like it's always felt to me like a band who think around the whole experience creatively, very interesting, musically, visually.
Yeah.
You know, they've got the whole thing, they want to bring something, and I've certainly felt that at the gig. I wish I'd gone to the Pet Shop Boys in New Order one, but I didn't get tickets for that.
They were so nice because I did a charity show a couple of years back for the Roundhouse, and they showed up and we did Left to My Own Devices and It's All Right. And they showed up, but they did it with such good grace as well. Sometimes when people show up, they can be a bit, you know, but they were wonderful. I mean, Chris, you know, when he's not got the miserable look on his face, is hilarious, you know. And the miserable look is it's his shtick, you know.
It's his shtick, yeah. I bet he's a lovely man. There's a lot in the book about technology. Now, to my great shame and embarrassment, I can't read music. I've never played an instrument. I'm very good at karaoke, but it doesn't count, I know. But there's a lot of music technology now, and I wanted to ask you a little bit about that because I think it really does sort of help to, I don't know, imagine what it is you're doing, how you get there to these magical tracks. And there's one brilliant sentence. You're talking about this thing called a Fairlight. Tell us what a Fairlight is before we hear.
Well, the Fairlight was the first digital sampler, you know. It would, you know, digitally record, because back then when it first came out, which I think was somewhere in 79, there were no digital recorders, but that technology was just starting with the very early drum machines were just synthesized sounds, and then suddenly the Lin came out and that had chips that had samples of real drums on them. Now the Fairlight was basically the tool that would have developed probably from the tool that they used to make those sounds for those chips. So it meant suddenly you had 8 seconds of sampling time, but you couldn't have 8 seconds of audio. It had to be broken into half-second chunks. It was incredibly primitive, but you know, it's like funny thing was, because it only had a 8K bandwidth or something, you know, it sort of shelved completely at 8 kilohertz, which, you know, to the uninitiated means it didn't have much top end, right? It also didn't have much bottom end. But that was a really cool thing because it meant it didn't sort of wobble at the bottom. It was very clear. And I was very lucky because I sort of did a deal with a guy who was totally into it. It was actually a geography teacher, JJ and John Yanchalik. And he spent like the next sort of 2 or 3 years after I hired him in a back room just working on it all the time. So I was way ahead of everybody else because of him, you know.
And there's this brilliant line in the book that says, I was the 5th or 6th musician in the UK to own a Fairlight. Jeff, Boggles Jeff, Kate Bush, Peter Gabriel, Pete Townsend and me. It's quite a good club to be in, I think.
Yeah, it was.
And do people still use a Fairlight or is it obsolete now?
Well, you see, there was a great year or two where it was the only game on the block, but it cost 18 grand and there was a waiting list, you know? 18 grand is a lot of money. Back in 82, it was a shitload of money, you know? It was like you could get a house up north for 18 grand.
Yeah.
Like, you probably still can. So for a year, about a year and a half, 2 years, there was nothing else in the field. Then suddenly Akai brought out a thing called the S900, which had much better sampling time and was easier to operate. And the technology took off and everybody was doing it. You know?
And are you still excited by music technology? New kit, or not really?
I'm stupid. I do. I just bought a drum machine the other day. I do get excited by bits of kit, you know, and little synthesizers. There's or whatever is new that's out. At the moment, they've just brought out a load of these micro synths, and they sound great. They've got, you know, I mean, I've got some of the old things like a Jupiter 8 and synths like that, but these are only this big, and they only cost a few £100. And I think they sound as good.
Yeah. I want to go right back. We're going to get onto stories about really famous people doing cool stuff, so just bear with me. But I do want to go right back to the beginning, Trevor, because the opening few chapters are, you know, you growing up and Durham and then new stuff. So, and we had, I mean, it sounded like we had that Nick Hornby in the back of our newsroom last week talking about, he's written a book about how Charles Dickens and Prince, he sort of mapped their lives together and sort of compared their creative process and similarities in the way they were brought up and stuff like that. It's good. And what I'm interested, it's just sort of got me thinking as to why you? Because you sort of came from this sort of completely ordinary background, not particularly musical in your house, but you had it in you.
No, my father was in the dance band.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
I don't know. Do you know, when I look back on it, I think I lived in a beautiful city. Durham was just the most beautiful place. And the surrounding sort of moorland was amazing, and it's probably why if you come from the north, you generally like sad songs, because there's something sort of very kind of remote and sad about some of the landscapes. And you know, Durham's got a castle that's it's nearly 1,200 years old, and a cathedral that's 1,100 years old. And I didn't realise when I was growing up how much of an impression the atmosphere of that makes on you. Hearing cathedral bells at night while you're walking by a river, you know?
Yeah.
And you don't get much of that in London.
No, that's true. But your dad was quite against, well, you explicitly told you not to.
My dad was against being a musician because it's not a very good profession. If you're really brilliant, then, you know, you might end up on, you know, say if you look at bass players, right? Probably the best bass player is the guy that used to play with Peter Gabriel. Tony Levin. Yeah, I mean, he's absolutely brilliant. And there's only kind of one of him, you know what I mean? And everybody else who's not as good, you know, you end up playing stuff you don't like. You end up doing whatever you have to do. It's a difficult life. That's why my dad didn't want me to go into it. And also at the time, I wasn't that good. The only thing that was good about me was that I could sight read music for the bass guitar. It didn't make me into Jack Bruce, you know. It just meant I could read it.
But you did work at it, though, didn't you?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
you
Once I started,
really in the
once
early
I
days.
started doing it for a living, I worked pretty hard at it. Yeah, and I tried being in groups a couple of times, but it was so clunky compared to being able to just show up and read the parts. If you're going to play crap, you might as well just read it. You know, you'd have to rehearse it. So I kind of, it sort of held me in good stead through my 20s, really. Whenever I needed it, I'd just take a paying job, you know.
And there's some brilliant pictures. There's a sort of, you know, the bit in the book with the pictures. They are funny. And actually, they come quite a long way after in the book. The part that you're talking about.
Yeah.
When I hit the bit, it was like, oh my God, that's not what I imagined that to look like. I imagined it quite a lot cooler.
It wasn't cool, that's for sure.
Cool. You were in Yes, which is a.
Yeah, well, I was in Yes as the singer. Yes was a totally different thing. I mean, I was a Yes fan all through the 70s, I'd say unashamedly, because I loved the bass player. I mean, he's still probably my favourite bass guitar player, and I loved the singer. I thought, you know, when all you've got's a high voice with no soul in it, right? There's nobody to identify with. Everybody had a kind of soulful voice. I didn't. Oh, and I heard John Anderson. I thought, well, I could probably do that. You know,
yeah.
So I loved Yes, and I had no idea I would end up being the singer in Yes, and it was the most incredible set of circumstances. You know, came from having a hit and then getting to meet Chris Squire. You know, when you meet your big hero, and I was feeling so confident. I thought I'd pitch him a song. I said, "I've got a song for Yes," and sang him this song, and that was it. I ended up on stage at Madison Square Gardens. But it's an experience, and I have to say that I learned a lot from that experience. One of the things I learned was, especially from Chris Squire, I kind of learned a bit about arranging songs that I didn't know before I met him. I thought I knew a lot about it, but I learned a lot from him. And after you've done 3 nights at Madison Square Gardens, you know, pretend to be John Anderson, nothing is going to scare you ever again. You know what I mean? Nobody's going to intimidate you, man. I've done 3 nights at Madison Square Gardens. You know, what have you done? It gave me a lot of confidence afterwards.
That's right, as well it should. There's a brief bit when you're talking about being in ZTT, the label you run for all those years, and your late wife Jill was saying, you know, Trevor, you need to go out and do more A&R. Is that what you call it? Looking for new talent spotting, right? Talent spotting. And you write in the book, my problem was that I always thought most things were shit, which is what made you not a very good A&R person. I told you it was funny. Is that still true? Do you still think most things are shit?
No, well, most songs are. I mean, that's the problem. Or a lot of them are, especially ones that aren't successful. Ones that are very successful generally aren't. But when when you're working in the music business, you get played loads of songs if you let people. You know, I try not to, unless it's very specific. Otherwise, I'm going to have to comment on it. And sometimes I've commented on songs to friends, and they've gone on a crusade to make me like it, showing up at different times with different versions of it. I know you're going to like this version. Oh God, I wish I'd never said anything. You know, so it's best not to say much. And when I was one of the judges for the Mercury Awards a few years back, and you get to hear the whole the best of the output of songwriters for the year. It's slim pickings, you know. But then you hear something, it's like I heard Relax, and I thought, great, I like this.
Yeah.
It didn't matter how crap the demo was, I could hear the idea. And the same, I'm sure it's the same in lots of other professions. Most professional songwriters write songs that are like songs that were hits. And sometimes you get fooled a bit by it, you know, like... you think, this is good. Yeah, it's that one. They've nicked that one, you know? They've nicked it from that one. I always love that, although it's not quite the same, that, email from record label to producer. Dear producer, we don't like the latest mix. What has changed? Producer, the record label. I took my voice off it and put your artist's voice on. It's, yeah.
So I was going to ask you, do you still listen to pop music? I imagine no, if most of it's shit.
Well, not all of it's shit. I mean, some of it's you know, I do. I like a few things. I bought the Yard Acts album, and I enjoyed that. Although I always find the tone of rap albums can get to you after a while because there's generally an element of complaining about it. But I love the way that they actually played behind it, you know?
Yeah.
I like that. And, you know, some of the, you know, Ed Sheeran's, you got to hand it to him. He's written some good stuff. So there are some good songs around, you know? Yeah,
well, that's good to know. I mean, it's funny, because I was just mentioning briefly before we came up to Janet that I've always loved pop music. I was born and raised on it, really. I was born in '76. And so even though I was little, a lot of the stuff you're talking about, it feels like these are my tunes because it's my sort of the first ones that you really love, and me and my brother bonded over it and talked about it and stuff. And but I've always been a bit embarrassed somehow the genre of pop music is sort of silly. It's a silly, not a nothing thing. And so I felt really vindicated reading your book because I was like, no, these are proper people. They're really talented. They know what they're doing. It's very specific and deliberate. Yeah. And then I was gutted when I got to the bit where you said pop music is a very drivel-ridden business because I was like, no, Trevor, not you as well.
No, I meant that a lot of the time people are faking it, you know?
Yeah.
And then you hear a song that's written, you know, from the heart, somehow you can sense it. You know, well, I think I can.
Yeah.
And I never used to, you know, back in the 80s, I don't think I ever really did a song that was written by professional songwriters. They were always songs that had been written by a band or, you know, maybe Bruce Woolley had, you know, who wrote Slave to the Rhythm, is sort of a professional songwriter, but I got him to totally rewrite it. So, so I had some input. But, yeah, I'm sorry about that. I didn't mean to upset you with that line.
It's okay. I've got over it. That's a nice segue, almost like we planned it, into Grace Jones. But if you've got questions for Trevor, please do. I'm going to just ask a couple more and then we'll take some from the floor. But Grace Jones, who we have a little bit of experience here at Tortoise because she headlined at our festival that we do in the summer last year. So at an arm's length, we've experienced Grace. She told you off though, didn't she?
Oh yeah, she bollocked me for about half an hour. She blamed everything on me, but God bless her. I kind of knew it was coming because I had ducked her phone calls, but she'd gone through about 3 managers and I'd given up, you know. And I was very fond of her because she's really warm, Grace.
Yeah.
You know, she's not. I mean, you probably did you do?
I had no personal interface with her, Grace. No, too scared.
But she's pulled a couple of stunts and, you know, alienated a few people occasionally, I think. But you know, I got to see the good side of her, and I liked her. She's funny.
And Paul McCartney told you off as well.
Yeah.
What was that?
Well, it was because we went off. We couldn't. We had to cancel some sessions with him, and we had to go off and do Simple Minds because we had to finish that album, and he got very cross. So he I told his manager, and his manager said, "Oh, you're going to have to talk to his fabness. You're not going to get away with this." And I said, "Oh, he'll be okay though, won't he?" And he said, "Well, you watch out." He wasn't. But in the end, we got back together. He was cross with, you know, he was disappointed. I felt bad about it because he's nice, you know.
He seems nice.
Yeah, he is.
We'd all be really upset if we discovered Paul McCartney wasn't nice. I think the world comes to an end. Right, who's got questions? Stick your hand in the air, don't be shy. Come on, somebody must have. Matt, I know you're sitting there with 1,000 questions and trying to be polite.
Yeah, I'm just trying to. I've got so many.
Don't worry.
Because I was the guy who was queuing at 5 o'clock in the morning to get Welcome to the Pleasure Dome. The album, and I think you were a bit hard on it. I think it was better than you say. But did you? I mean, with all the 12-inch mixes, which I also bought those records, did you realise how early on in the process of ZTT Frankie after Noise, you know, broke out. Did you realise this was a game changer? Not just for music, but for the whole of there's something about that moment in that decade.
Yeah.
Those records. I remember the video of Two Tribes premiering on the Tube with Muriel Gray and the band, as you described them, all draped over sofas, you know. How early on in the process of that, and you do describe it in the book, but did you realise this is more than just, you know, Relax could have been a novelty hit, couldn't it?
Yeah.
But it wasn't. There was more to it than that, a lot more.
Yeah, it kind of went off like a rocket with Relax. It put loads of pressure on Two Tribes, and you know, that's why it took so long. I was terrified, because when you got that kind of momentum, if the second one isn't really good, you've had it. You know, years and years ago, back in the 70s, I was living with Tina Charles when I was her boyfriend when I Love to Love, but My Baby Loves to Dance was a big hit. And I went to the... It's me banging my knee. And I went to the Top of the Pop studios with her, and I was watching it all go on, and I met her A&R guy. It was a guy called Robin Blanchflower, and I always remember, I said to him, "You look miserable." And he went, the follow-up. And I was like, "Yeah, but you got number one." He's like, "The follow-up. We haven't got the follow-up." And so, you know, with Relax, I was just, the follow-up. Oh, my God. You need the follow-up. And to believe me, Two Tribes at the start didn't sound like a follow-up for Relax, even remotely. But then, you know, it turned a few corners and I did become aware to when we did the 12-inch that had, you know, If Your Mother or Anybody Else Should Die Whilst in the Shelter stuff on it, I thought, this is good. This is really good. People I love this. It's great. Now we can let the single go. Now I know we've got this 12-inch and we've got this whole thing. But it was... and am I down on it in the book?
Well, you're on the album, you're a little bit hard on yourself, I think.
Well, because I was saying, why the hell did I do Born to Run and San Jose? But when I look back, and you know, I never thought about it till afterwards. Probably the reason both of the songs are about travelling, going, moving, and you know, Frankie Goes to Hollywood. Their name came from Frank Sinatra going to Hollywood. You know, the big poster that said Frankie Goes to Hollywood. And maybe those songs had the same kind of feeling in them to me. You know. It's hard to find those kind of songs. But I, as a sort of, you know, I suppose I was a bit hard on it because it would have been much easier for us to be sort of cheapskate and just bang the singles on it and put it out, rather than, you know, spending ages doing a 16-minute version of Welcome to the Pleasure Dome. But I do think Welcome to the Pleasure Dome, the track, is really good, you know, for what it is. It's a good journey, you know. If you want to go on a journey, it's a good one.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you so much. Mark, did you have one?
I was just holding the mic ready.
Oh. Come on, you're a Dollar super fan. You must have questions.
Yeah, do you know what? I'm a huge Dollar super fan. Paris Collection, best track is Radio, I think.
All right.
Yeah. Pardon me. Do you ever... what's it like when sort of fashions move on and it becomes kind of cool to ridicule certain artists, you know? And do you get a bit defensive when people start kind of taking the mickey out of some of the bands? Like I'm a Bucks Fizz apologist, for instance. And I spend a lot of my time going, no, they're actually quite good. Don't get me started. And then someone in the office the other day asked me what the difference was between Bucks Fizz and Dollar, and he didn't get away for like 25 minutes. Yeah.
Bucks Fizz made some really good records.
It's fantastic.
My Camera Never Lies was a really good record. And The Land of Make Believe.
Yeah.
You know, I was in a New York studio once, and I heard The Land of Make Believe coming out one of the rooms, and I thought, what the hell is that doing in New York in a recording studio? So I went to the, you know, it was single rooms. I went to the room where I could hear it coming from, and I went in, and there was a producer sitting there with his feet up on the board, and an engineer, and they were mixing it. And I said, what are you doing? And he said, I'm mixing this shit for the label. And I was like, really? I said, have you heard the English mix of this? No. I said, you should listen to it, man. The drums on it are great, you know. Drums are really loud and everything. And I thought, that record won't see the light of day in America. This jackass is going to mix it, and he'll kill everything that's good about it, you know. So I used to like. I don't. People who mention Dollar. I mean, there's lots to ridicule about Dollar, if you want. But most of the people that mention them to me don't ridicule them because, in order to know about them, you've got to be a bit of a knobhead kind of fan, really.
Shade, Mark. You've just been shamed by Trevor Horn, legendary music producer.
Me too. I'm fine if nobody's got any questions.
Yeah.
I want to see the choir.
And well, yeah, we want to see the choir, but we're not going to see the choir until we've talked about Band Aid.
Right, Band-Aid.
We're in a Christmas log cabin, so it would be remiss of us not to talk about it.
Right.
But Band Aid, the 7-inch is your greatest record that you didn't produce, because you did the 12-inch, not the 7-inch, right?
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about the day of it. You weren't going to go.
Well, I wasn't going to go because, you know, I'd had one brush with Bob Geldorf and he'd been a bit rude. But I subsequently learned that that's the way it is with him all the time, so, you know, you get used to it. And my Jill, my late wife, had you know, obviously, you know, everyone had seen the pictures. It was so horrible. It was the first time we ever saw anything like that. But then she called me from the studio and said, come on, you need to come down here. It's all kicking off. It's amazing. And, you know, Psalm West was an old church, and, boy, it was packed. It had every single singer that you could think of. Everybody was there, and they were making the record upstairs. I didn't really get involved much. I hung out, and then Bob said, you'll do the 12-inch as soon as we've done the 7-inch. I didn't even argue. And I was like, what are we going to do for the 12-inch? We'll have to think of something. Because it was a slow song. It's Christmas time. Well, it's not easy to make a 12-inch out of that. Because 12 inches, you know, were dance things. And, you know, and so I tried to get all of these singers to do a kind of round, you know, like you used to do at school. Do they know it's Christmas? Which failed dismally. I felt like a real dick. And you know, they're there, they all are. But we finally, we finally got the tape, me and Lippo, Steve Lipson, by 8 o'clock in the morning. I think it was practically worn out. They'd been over the head so many times. And we lifted off a bit of Phil Collins' drums, made it into a loop, and then we had loads of messages from McCartney, David Bowie, all kinds of people. And we loaded them all into the synclavier. The synclavier had 65 seconds of sampling time. And I just played them off the keyboard over the rhythm. And sometimes messed about with them, you know. This is Paul Weller, Weller, you know, that kind of stuff, stupid stuff. That was my contribution to Band Aid.
Well, I think you owned the building that they did it in as well, didn't you?
Yeah, we owned the building they did it in.
That was
no, because, that's the famous... when I showed up, the guy went, sorry, mate, it's a private thing on the go. And I said... I own this building. Oh, all right. It's the only time I've ever said anything like that. Because, you know, the worst thing you can say is, do you know who I am? I mean, it's like you know, after Video Killed the Radio Star was a huge hit, or somewhere back in the 80s, I went back up to Durham and I went to a wedding, and there was a relative who said, are you the pop star? I go, yeah. What's your name? Trevor Horn. Never heard of you.
brilliant.
You leave yourself open. Well, I haven't heard of you either.
We are going to listen to that little extract. In our house, it was my big... I wish could say it was me. I bought the Frog Chorus. My older brother bought the 12-inch of Do They Know It's Christmas. So he now still lords over me for being infinitely cooler. But when I used to listen, you know, because the record player was in the lounge, because that's where it was, and I would lift the needle over the bit of tune, and you could see the sort of vinyl change, the texture of it changed a little bit when you got to the bit with the answer phone messages on. I would lift the needle over and go straight to the bit, because it really felt to me like these these are my pop star mates wishing me a Merry Christmas, and I would listen to it again and again and
I've
again.
never
I went,
heard it since we
hear
did it.
now. So,
Okay, well this is Bono here, the singer.
Bono.
Wishing you a happy Christmas and a Merry New Year. Is that right?
Hello, this is Paul McCartney. Sorry I can't be with you.
It's a song from Jones and Mike. I'd like to say, I'd like to wish you a happy Christmas.
I'm Paul from the Star Council and I wish you all a happy Christmas.
That's Richard from Tortoise and Trevor Horn. I made a group the other day. Just have a good Christmas and enjoy yourself.
Hello, this is Paul McCartney. Hello, this is Paul McCartney. Hello, this is Paul McCartney. Sorry I can't do that. I'll do that.
This is Jones and Mike Oldfield saying, feed the world. There are 11 million people starving in one country. That doesn't make you think. Happy Christmas, everyone.
Well, this is John Taylor from Trin. Happy Christmas, everybody, too.
Bananarama.
I'm Siobhan, happy Christmas. I'm Sarah from Bananarama, happy Christmas.
And from me too, Karen.
Hello, this is Glenn from 17, wishing everybody a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Oh, this is Stewart. This is Stewart. This is Martha Ziggy. This is Chris Watson from Big Country. Feed the people.
Still alive. Wait, pray silence. There we go. David Bowie comes on all serious at the end. Everybody has to shut up, having their fun. Exactly. It's the last thing I want to say.
I've never heard that since I did it, honestly.
Oh, it's good, isn't
made
it?
me laugh, yeah.
Excellent work. Trevor, thank you so much for coming.
My pleasure.
Thank you for the book, but most of all, thank you for these tunes. They have given me so much joy throughout my whole life.
Okay.
Please keep doing it. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Trevor Horn, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.